Put the plate down, Elise. Caleb Rourke's voice cut across the dining room. I was standing beside table 9 with a plate of roast chicken in my hands. The elderly man sitting there looked more embarrassed than hungry now. His bank card had failed twice, and Caleb had already taken his meal away as if the man had tried to steal it. I placed the plate back in front of him. Caleb stepped closer. Touch that table again and you won't finish this shift. My heart was pounding, but I reached into my apron and pulled out the small envelope where I kept my tips. Then take his meal out of this. The old man looked at me. Young lady, you do not have to do that. The food is already cooked, I said. You shouldn't be humiliated because your card didn't work. Caleb stared at the notes in my hand, then at me. Take off your apron. You're done here. The room went quiet. What nobody knew was that the money I had just used was nearly everything I had left until payday. But Caleb knew even less than I did. The elderly man at table 9 was Silas Evermont, founder and majority owner of the entire restaurant chain, and by the next morning, Caleb was going to learn exactly who he had thrown out. My name is Elise Fenwick, and before that Saturday night, I had worked at Cinder and Sage in Kestermere for almost 3 years. I did not plan to carry plates forever. I had completed a part-time course in hospitality management and twice applied for a supervisor role inside the company. Caleb blocked me both times. He said I lacked management polish. That was strange, because whenever a new server arrived, I trained them. Whenever a guest complained, Caleb sent me. Whenever someone called in sick, I was the person expected to stay late. At home, I shared a small flat with my younger brother, Micah. He was doing an electrical apprenticeship and earning just enough to cover his own costs. We helped each other where we could, but there was never much left over. Every pound mattered. That night, my tips were meant to pay for groceries and Micah's travel pass for the next week. I expected a normal Saturday rush. Busy tables. Tired feet. Caleb finding something small to complain about. Then, just after 7, an elderly man came through the door wearing an old brown coat. He asked for a quiet table. I gave him table 9. Before the night was over, I would lose my job because of him. And before the week was over, I would learn that my firing had uncovered something much bigger than one cruel manager. Silas came in alone during the busiest part of the evening. Most people arriving at that hour wanted a large table, drinks, and something quick from the kitchen. Silas was different. He looked around the room, then asked if there was somewhere quiet. I showed him to table 9 near the back wall. He thanked me twice. His coat looked old but clean. His shoes were worn at the edges. He spoke softly and never once complained about the wait, even though the kitchen was running behind. He ordered roast chicken, vegetables, and a pot of tea. When I brought the food over, he smiled. That smells better than anything I have had all week. I laughed. Then I hope it tastes as good. For the next half hour, I barely noticed him. I was too busy carrying plates and clearing tables. Then Lorna called my name from the till. Elise, can you come here? Silas was standing beside her with his bank card in his hand. It declined, Lorna whispered. Silas looked confused. Try it again, please. She did. Declined. He checked another pocket, then another. His face changed. My wallet, he said. I must have left it somewhere. Caleb appeared almost at once. What is the delay? Lorna explained. Silas asked for a few minutes. He said he could call someone. Then he pressed the side button on his phone. The screen stayed black. One man at a nearby table laughed. Convenient. Another customer looked Silas up and down. People should check they can pay before ordering. I expected Caleb to stop them. Instead, he folded his arms. Sir, if you cannot settle the bill, we need the table. Silas looked at his half-finished meal. I am not refusing to pay. I just need a little time. Caleb turned to me. Take the plate. I hesitated. Elise. I picked it up. Silas lowered his eyes as two customers watched. Something about that bothered me more than the unpaid bill. The food was already cooked. Nobody else could use it. The man had not shouted, lied or tried to run. He was simply stuck. I looked at Caleb, then at Silas. Then at the plate in my hands. How much does he owe? I asked. Caleb stared at me as if I had asked something ridiculous. That is not your concern. I can pay it. His face tightened. No. Clear the table and get back to work. Silas lifted one hand. Please. I do not want trouble for anyone. But people were already watching. Caleb, the food is cooked. If I pay for it, the restaurant loses nothing. You are not the manager. I know. Then stop behaving like one. That hurt, because he knew how many times I had applied for a supervisor role. Still, I reached into my apron and pulled out my tip envelope. Caleb lowered his voice. If you challenge me in front of guests again, you will not finish this shift. For a second, I almost put the money away. I thought about the groceries I still had to buy and Micah's travel pass. Then I looked at Silas. He looked ashamed, and that decided it. I counted out the cost of his meal and placed the notes beside the till. Then take his meal out of this. Silas watched me. Young lady, you do not have to do that. The food is already cooked, I said. You shouldn't be humiliated because your card didn't work. Lorna took the money. Caleb said nothing until Silas returned to his table. Then he pointed towards the office. Now. Inside, he shut the door. What exactly were you trying to prove? Nothing. I paid the bill. You ignored a direct instruction. I stopped a customer from being embarrassed. You undermined me in front of a full restaurant. The restaurant was paid. This is not about the money. That was when I understood. It was about control. Caleb opened the staff drawer and pulled out a termination form. You are finished here. I will record this as misconduct. My stomach dropped. Caleb, please. At least let me finish the week. No. I took off my apron. When I walked back into the dining room, Silas stood up. What happened? I've been fired. He looked towards Caleb. I can explain. Caleb cut him off. You need to leave too. At the door, Silas turned to me. What is your full name? Elise Fenwick. He repeated it slowly. Elise Fenwick. I will remember that. I thought he meant the meal. I had no idea what he really meant. I had enough money left for a bus home. I walked instead. The whole way, I kept asking myself whether I had been brave or stupid. By the time I reached our flat, my feet hurt and my anger had settled into fear. Micah was at the kitchen table with wires, tools, and a training manual spread around him. He looked up. You're early. I put my bag down. Not by choice. He waited. I tried to make it sound smaller than it was. There was a problem at work. What kind of problem? I sat opposite him. The kind where I do not work there anymore. His face changed. I told him about Silas, the card, the customers, Caleb and the meal. When I finished, Micah leaned back. You got fired for paying for someone's dinner? Apparently, I undermined management. He shook his head. That is mad. It is also expensive. I opened my purse and showed him what was left. His travel pass was due on Monday. Our cupboards were already thin. Micah reached for a small tin where he kept his savings. No. You haven't even heard what I was going to say. I know what you were going to say. I can cover food for a few days. That money is for your tools. We'll manage. I wanted to believe him. Later, I opened the employee portal on my laptop. I planned to download my payslips before my account was closed. Then I saw the dismissal note. My chest went cold. Dishonesty and unauthorized handling of company property. I read it 3 times. I had paid for the meal. There had been no theft. But if another Cinder and Sage branch checked my record, that note could make me look dishonest. I found the receipt in my bag, took a clear photo and sent an appeal to HR. No speech. No threats. I wrote what happened, attached the receipt and asked them to review the CCTV. Then I opened job sites. I had sent 4 applications before midnight. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was making tea. An email from Evermont Hospitality had arrived. The subject line read, "Urgent, formal review of your termination." My first thought was that Caleb had complained about me again. I opened it with shaking hands. I was wrong. Before I could finish reading the email, my phone rang. It was Lorna. "Elise?" She was whispering. "What happened? You are not going to believe this." I sat down. "Try me." The old man came back. My hand tightened around the phone. "Silas?" "Yes, but he was not alone." Lorna told me 2 senior executives had walked into Cinder and Sage with him just before opening. Caleb had gone pale. A few minutes later, the doors were locked and a notice went up saying the restaurant was closed for a private management review. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked. "That is what I am trying to tell you. Everyone is saying the old man is somebody important." After we hung up, I returned to the email. It asked me to attend a meeting that afternoon at the regional office. No explanation, just a time, address, and the name of the person expecting me. I almost did not go. But I wanted my record cleared. So at 2 o'clock, I walked into a glass building on the other side of Kestermere wearing the best blouse I owned. A receptionist led me upstairs. When the meeting room door opened, I stopped. Silas was sitting at the table. Beside him was a woman in a dark blue suit. Silas stood. "Elise. Thank you for coming." I looked from him to the woman. "I do not understand." The woman introduced herself. "My name is Juliet Evermont. I am chief executive of Evermont Hospitality." The surname hit me first. Then Silas spoke. "I founded the company." I stared at him. He explained that Evermont Hospitality owned every Cinder and Sage branch. He had stepped back from daily management years ago, but he still held most of the company. Sometimes, he said, he visited restaurants without warning. Not to test the food. To watch how people behaved when they thought nobody important was there. Then his expression changed. "After you left, I asked one question. If Caleb treats an old stranger that way, how does he treat the people who work for him?" Juliet opened a file. We started looking. I expected her to talk about my firing. Instead, she said, "Elise, what we found did not begin with you." And suddenly, clearing my name was no longer the only reason I was in that room. Juliet turned the file towards me. The first page was a still image from the restaurant CCTV. It showed me beside the till with my tip envelope open. "The footage is clear," she said. "You paid the full bill." She turned another page. "The payment record matches the time on the video." I looked at Silas. "So the misconduct note?" "False," Juliet said. "Caleb had written that I had taken company food without permission and behaved dishonestly. The video proved the opposite. But the review had gone further." Juliet pulled out copies of my old supervisor applications. I recognized them straight away. I thought regional management rejected these. They never received them. I looked up. What? Both times, I had passed the internal supervisor assessment. Both times, Caleb had stopped my application at branch level. The reason he entered was that I lacked leadership experience, yet my file showed I had trained 11 new starters, covered team lead duties during staff shortages and received some of the strongest customer feedback in the branch. I felt more angry about that than the firing. For 2 years, he told me I was not ready. Silas leaned forward. "Being treated unfairly does not mean you are ready for every opportunity." "I know." Good. Juliet asked why I had taken a hospitality management course. I told her the truth. I like restaurants. I like the pace. I like turning a bad evening into a good one for a guest. I think staff work better when they are treated like people, not machines. Silas gave a small nod. Juliet placed a folder in front of me. On the cover were the words, Restaurant Leadership Academy. I did not touch it. What is this? An invitation to sit the entry assessment. My first feeling was not excitement. It was worry. I do not want a career because I paid for his dinner. Juliet almost smiled. Good. Because feeding him only got you into this room. She explained the rules. Same assessment. Same pass mark. Same probation. If I failed, I was out. If I passed, I would earn a place like everyone else. I finally picked up the folder. When is the assessment? Friday. I looked at Silas. He said nothing. He did not need to. I had asked for a fair chance for years. Now I had one. I'll be there. Friday morning, I arrived 40 minutes early. The assessment room was already half full. Some candidates wore expensive suits. Others were current assistant managers or team leaders from different branches. I recognized nobody. For once, that helped. No one in the room knew about Table 9. The assessment had 3 parts. First came numbers, staffing costs, food waste, sales, and basic profit. Then we had to respond to a customer complaint. The final task was a case study about a restaurant losing staff and receiving poor reviews. Nothing was made easier for me. That was exactly how I wanted it. A week later, Juliet phoned. You passed. I closed my eyes. Then she added, you finished 4th in the intake. For a moment, I could not speak. 4th. Not last. Not barely through. 4th. On my first day at the academy, Silas asked to see me. He did not offer me money. He did not promise me a promotion. He simply said, I opened one door, Elise. If you want the next one, earn it. I plan to. Good. By lunch, the story had traveled. Someone had discovered why I had been invited to the assessment. I heard the whisper near the coffee machine. That's her. The waitress? The one who fed the owner. A man beside them laughed. So that is all it takes now? I kept walking. I had expected questions. What I had not expected was how quickly one act could erase everything else people did not know about me. That afternoon, I met Gareth Pike, a regional operations director assigned to speak to our group. He had a reputation for improving weak branches. He looked at my name badge for a second too long. Fenwick. Yes. I have heard about you. I waited. Kindness makes a good story, he said. Running restaurants requires numbers. I agree. That seemed to surprise him. If I cannot do the work, I should not be here. His eyes narrowed slightly. That is a sensible answer. It did not sound like praise. As he walked away, I understood something. Getting into the academy had not ended the fight over whether I belonged. It had only moved it to a bigger room. And this time I was not going to prove myself with one good deed. I was going to do it with results. The academy did not get easier after the first week. If anything, it became harder. Some of the trainees had already worked as assistant managers. Others had run kitchens, managed stock, or studied business full-time. I had spent most of my working life carrying plates, calming angry guests, and covering shifts when someone failed to turn up. There were gaps in what I knew. So I stopped being embarrassed by them. I stayed late to study labor costs. I asked questions when I did not understand a report. I volunteered for the busiest training shifts because I knew I learned faster when things went wrong. What I refused to do was act ashamed of being a waitress. During one group exercise, a trainee looked at my notes and laughed. Well, if we need advice on polishing cutlery, we know who to ask. A few people smiled. Gareth was standing close enough to hear. He said nothing. That told me more than any insult could have. A week later, our group was sent to another cinder and sage branch in the town of Bracken Hollow. The numbers were bad. Customer ratings had fallen for 6 months. Food waste was rising. Staff were resigning almost every week. Senior managers had already written report after report. Everyone in my group went straight to the spreadsheets. I started somewhere else. I asked the servers what happened during the dinner rush. I spoke to hosts about waiting times. I asked kitchen porters when the backlog usually began. I spoke to cooks, delivery workers, and the person who handled stock. At first, some looked surprised that anyone wanted their opinion. By the third day, I had heard the same complaint from 5 different people. The problem was not lazy staff. It was not rude customers. It was not even the kitchen. The shifts were built badly. Too few people were working during the busiest 40 minutes of the night, while too many arrived after the pressure had already passed. That one mistake caused a chain reaction. Tables waited. Tickets piled up. Food was remade. Guests complained. Managers blamed staff. Then good workers left. I went back to the group with my notes. Gareth glanced at them. You think all this comes down to a rota? No, I said. I think the rota is where it starts. For the first time, he stopped smiling. Once I saw the pattern, I could not unsee it. The branch was pushing servers to sell more while giving them too many tables at once. That meant more orders reached the kitchen in the same few minutes. The cooks fell behind. Guests waited. Food sat too long and had to be made again. Then managers blamed each team separately. I had worked enough busy nights to know the problem was not one bad worker. The whole system was fighting itself. I built a small plan. I suggested overlapping shifts by 30 minutes during the evening rush. I asked for clearer table limits so one server could not be given more guests than they could handle. I moved one prep job to the afternoon team instead of leaving it for dinner service. I also wanted staff to record repeated guest complaints in one shared log. Gareth read the proposal and frowned. That is very simple. Simple does not mean useless. You think changing a few shift times will fix 6 months of poor results? I think we should test it before deciding. Juliet approved a 4-week trial. The second week was better. By the end of the month, average waiting times had fallen. Less food was being remade. Fewer shifts ended with arguments. 2 workers who had planned to leave decided to stay. Customer reviews began rising too. For the first time since I entered the academy, people stopped asking how I had been noticed. They started asking how I had spotted the problem. That felt earned. At the end of the trial, Juliet called me into her office. We want to expand this. To another branch? 5. I stared at her. You want me to lead it? Yes. My first thought was that she had chosen the wrong person. My second was that I had said the same thing about the academy. So I accepted. When I told Gareth, his face stayed calm. 5 branches is a different level. I know. Only later did I learn that the project had been expected to fall under his control. I had not taken anything from him. Juliet had given it to me because my pilot worked. But Gareth did not see it that way. From that moment, I was no longer the waitress he doubted. I was standing in the path of something he believed belonged to him. Leading one trial had been difficult. Leading 5 branches was different. Now every decision affected dozens of staff, thousands of guests, and a budget large enough to make one mistake painful. I was proud of the chance. I was also frightened of wasting it. Gareth was assigned as senior advisor because he had far more experience than I did. At first, I was glad. Whatever he thought of me, he understood the company. I asked him questions. I listened when his advice made sense. But after a few weeks, his behavior changed. In meetings, he would say things like, "Perhaps the waitress has another idea." If I disagreed with him, he asked whether Silas had already approved my answer. When our numbers improved, he suggested I had been given extra support. I wanted to argue. Instead, I did something less satisfying and far more useful. I kept records. Every change had a date. Every cost had an invoice. Every result had a source. Every important decision was confirmed in writing. I had already learned what happened when someone powerful controlled the story after the fact. I would not make that mistake again. Meanwhile, Caleb's case was still open. Corporate investigators were reviewing more than my firing, but nobody told me much. Then one evening, Gareth stayed late after a regional meeting. I did not know it then, but he contacted Caleb. Caleb had every reason to hate me. His branch was under review because Silas had seen what happened at Table 9. And Gareth wanted one thing from him. A story. He wanted Caleb to say I was dishonest. That I changed figures. That I made people feel sorry for me. That I had climbed through the company because Silas felt guilty. Caleb was happy to help. Together, they decided to target the annual leadership presentation. It was the biggest review of my 5-branch project. The board would be there. Juliet would be there. Silas would be there. If the figures looked false, the whole project could collapse. And I could lose the one thing I had worked hardest to build. My name. I had been fired once because Caleb wrote the word dishonest beside it. Now 2 men were preparing to use the same word again. The difference was that this time, I had kept every piece of proof. The annual leadership presentation was held at Evermont Hospitality's main office. I arrived early and checked everything twice. The slides worked. The reports matched my notes. The 5 branches had improved in different ways, but the pattern was clear. Waiting times were down. Waste was lower. Staff turnover had improved. When my name was called, I walked to the front and began. For the first 10 minutes, everything went as planned. Then I reached the financial projections. I stopped. One number was wrong. Then I saw another. A cost had been reduced on one slide and increased somewhere else. The final total made the project look more profitable than the figures I had approved. My mouth went dry. I clicked back. The earlier pages were right. Only the financial section had changed. I looked across the room. Gareth was sitting near the side wall. His face gave nothing away. Juliet spoke first. Elise? I had 2 choices. I could keep going and hope nobody noticed. Or I could stop the biggest presentation of my career and admit that I could not explain the figures on the screen. I put the remote on the table. I need to stop here. The room went silent. These are not the projections I approved. Gareth leaned forward. Are you saying your own presentation is wrong? I am saying these figures are not the ones I signed off. A board member asked whether I could continue. No. I can't ask you to approve numbers I did not verify. Gareth shook his head. This is exactly why experience matters. I ignored him. I asked for 24 hours to trace the file history and compare it with my records. Juliet agreed. Walking out of that room felt strangely familiar. At Table 9, I had chosen between protecting my job and doing what I thought was right. I lost the job. Now the same choice had returned with much more at stake. But this time I was ready. Every report I had submitted was saved. Every approved version had a date. Every change had a trail. That evening, the digital team checked the system. Just before midnight, Juliet phoned. Elise, we know the file was changed after you submitted it. I sat up. By who? She paused. We are confirming that now. But from her voice, I knew they already had a name. The next morning, I was called back to the main office. Juliet was waiting with Silas and 2 people from the audit team. Gareth was not there. That told me enough. The audit showed that my presentation file had been opened after I submitted the final version. The access came from Gareth's office. At first, he claimed someone else must have used his computer. Then investigators found messages between him and Caleb. Caleb had sent old waste reports from my former branch and described me as dishonest and careless. Some of the reports were false. Others had been changed before they were sent. Gareth had used them to build a story that my results could not be trusted. Then the investigation into Caleb uncovered something worse. For months, staff at my old branch had been receiving less service charge money than the records showed. Amounts had been moved between reports. Waste figures had also been changed to hide unauthorized payments. That was why Caleb had been so quick to control complaints. It was also why he did not want anyone above him looking closely at the branch. My dismissal was officially ruled wrongful. The misconduct note was removed from my record. Gareth was dismissed for changing company information and trying to mislead the board. Caleb lost his job and was placed under a separate investigation over the missing staff money. When Juliet told me, I expected to feel excited. I did feel relieved. But revenge did not feel the way I had imagined. It was quieter. She asked me what mattered most now. I thought about the people who had worked late, served difficult tables and gone home with less money than they had earned. Repay the staff. Juliet nodded. We will. The company reviewed the records and paid every affected worker what they were owed. My 5-branch project was then approved for a wider rollout. Months later, I was promoted into a permanent operations role. Silas congratulated me. So, he said, Table 9 worked out well. I smiled. Table 9 got me noticed. The work came after. That is the right answer. The people who tried to prove I was dishonest had ended up leaving the trail that exposed them. I never had to destroy them. I only had to make sure the truth had somewhere to stand. 2 years later, I was responsible for guest experience and staff standards across a large part of Cinder and Sage. I still visited restaurants without warning. Not because I wanted to catch people doing something wrong. I had learned that offices could hide problems that dining rooms showed in minutes. One evening, I visited a branch in Alder Quay. The restaurant had closed, but a young server was still sitting beside an elderly customer. Her name was Bethan Crow. The woman had discovered she was short of money when the bill arrived. Bethan had offered to pay the difference herself. For a second, I was back at table 9. I waited until the customer left. Then I asked Bethan why she had done it. She looked confused. She was hungry. I had enough. I knew that answer. But I did not promote her. I did not hand her money. I asked what she wanted to do next. Bethan told me she hoped to study restaurant management one day but did not know how she could afford it. I showed her the employee development program. You still have to qualify, I told her. That is fair. Good. Apply. Later that year, the company created a discrete meal fund. Staff and customers could contribute, and managers could use it when someone faced a genuine problem. No employee would ever again have to risk their job simply because they refused to watch a hungry person be humiliated. A few weeks later, Silas and I sat together at table 9. Do you ever regret paying for my meal? I looked around the room. I regretted losing my job. I never regretted feeding you. He smiled. I never forgot the waitress who treated me like a person before she knew my name. That stayed with me. Jobs can disappear. Money can disappear. Titles can change. But what you do when you think nobody important is watching says more about you than a title ever will. And sometimes, the person you think has nothing may be the person who changes everything. If you were in my place that night, would you have paid for Silas's meal, or followed Caleb's order? Tell me in the comments. If this story meant something to you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes kindness should never depend on status.